Joining me now is Associate Finance Minister Randy Boissonnault. Welcome, Minister. Now, interest rates are up again, so I imagine officials at the Department of Finance aren't really shocked about this. But how does this change the calculation as you craft that fall economic statement?
Well, Michael, it's a really good question, and I'm pleased to be on the show. The Bank of Canada is independent, as you know, and what we're doing as a government on the fiscal side is striking the right balance between making sure that we provide targeted supports to Canadians who need it the most during this time of rising inflation, but also making sure that we don't stoke the inflationary fires. And, you know, we invested in Canadians during the pandemic so we could have the economy come back, and the economy has come back. But what's happened is we have a really slow set of supply chains opening up around the world after the pandemic. The war in Ukraine with the increased prices in energy and food, plus also the fact that the COVID zero policy really keeps supply chains snarled in China, is really leading to high inflation around the world. And so we will be able to identify measures in the fall economic statement when it's announced. But what we're focused on right now is the doubling of the GST, which passed last week. And we really want to get 500,000 kids covered with dental supports, and we want to get those $500 checks out to people who are struggling with their rent. I mean, the opposition is saying $500 isn't a lot of money. I can tell you, I come from Alberta. I come from a working class family. I grew up in Morinville, Alberta, and even in 2022, $500 is still a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, and just on that, I was going to ask you, first off, do you care to share with our viewers when you're going to release that fall economic statement?
I'll leave that up to Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, but when she is able to announce that fall economic statement, you're going to see, that we're going to continue to work on that prudent fiscal track, because we have the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7 right now. And, as I said earlier, the Bank of Canada is independent. We are going to see a slowing down in the global economy. And Michael, I was at the Asia Pacific Finance Ministers meeting last week in Thailand, and it was very clear that the whole economic system in the world is slowing down. We're seeing a tightening of monetary policy in response to this higher inflation around the world. And I know that pinches Canadians' pockets at the grocery stores and at the pump, and that's why these targeted measures are really important to put more money in the pockets of Canadians who need it the most.
And speaking of that, the Toronto Star did report that Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland was warning cabinet ministers any new government spending needs to be funded by budget cuts. So is your government now pursuing this policy of austerity, and that we will see reflected in the fall economic statement?
I think you would call it a fiscal prudent track, and that was already telegraphed in Budget 22. I mean, in Budget 22 is a commitment to saving $9 billion a year in current government spending. And so the message to cabinet colleagues, myself included, that we're sending out is that we want to make sure that we have responsible investments in Canadians, and that we're making those investments on the supply side of the economy. Because look, what we have right now is an economy that's doing well, and people want goods and services, but the economy can't respond in time to getting them those goods, and that puts an upward pressure on those goods. And so we want to make sure that we're building infrastructure, that we're building on the supply side, that we have more people in the workforce. That's why the childcare investments, cutting childcare fees by 50% is so important, because what does it do? Michael, it puts more people into the workforce. So labor issues, immigration issues, all of these things will help with the economy. And the finance ministers that I met with and the economists that I met with, we are going to see a slowdown in the economy, but we are also going to see a pickup after 23 into 24. And so we've got some headwinds ahead, but there's no country in the world better positioned to manage those headwinds and then come out stronger on the other side than Canada.
You keep talking about the affordability plan that you guys have and some of those measures. I mean, one of the issues is that every Canadian is now dealing with the cost of living, but not every one of those Canadians actually benefits from your affordability measures. So what are you doing specifically for those Canadians that aren't getting any of that targeted help that you have put out there in the last few months?
It's a really good question, Michael. And so if we focus on the doubling of the GST and the dental supports, which will be for 500,000 kids, and the targeted rental supports, that helps about 11 million families. But if we go back to what we did in Budget 22 and even in Budget 21 with cutting childcare fees in half, people in Alberta, people in Ontario, people around the country are already saving thousands of dollars a year on their childcare fees. Seniors have their payments. So whether it's OAS, CPP, or GIS, those payments are indexed to inflation. So is the Canada Child Benefit. So are our other core benefits. And anybody, Michael, that's taken the Canada Workers benefit will have seen that doubled over the last year as well. So that's about $2,400 for a family. So when we take a look at all the supports, it really does target middle-class families who are, really faced by this inflationary spike. We do intend to see that inflation going down. We're into, a slowdown in the economy, but we are going to come out better the other side.
But it sounds like you're saying that other than the targeted measures, there's nothing that is broad-based for Canadians, that they can get that relief that they're feeling now in that pinch, either at the pump or at the checkout counter.
Well, doubling the GST and 500,000 kids getting dental benefits,
but with respect, not everybody gets those. With respect, not everybody gets those, Minister Boissonnault.
Right. And this is the fine balance, Michael, that we have to have between targeted supports and still about $3.2 billion in new spending, but not spending so much that we're going to increase inflation and make the Bank of Canada's job harder. And we know that these are the right supports to do because they're a small fraction of the Canadian economy, about 1/1000th of the Canadian economy. So we're going to continue to watch the situation. We're going to continue to listen to Canadians, but we're going to have this really, this really clear balancing act between inflation and targeted supports to those who need it the most.
Associate Minister, Finance Minister Randy Boissonnault, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Michael.